Why does everything feel so complicated when the rules running the universe are surprisingly simple? Think about what you saw today. Rain didn't ask where to fall, an apple didn't negotiate before dropping, smoke didn't check a map before rising, and the moon, after billions of years, still shows up right on time. From the inside, none of this feels neat. Life feels noisy, crowded with details full of exceptions, like everything is barely holding together. So it seems reasonable to assume nature must be doing the same thing we do, patching problems with more rules. One rule for weather, another for plants, another for animals, another for stars, and surely a special confusing one just for us. That's what you'd expect. But here's where things start to feel strange. When you look closely, really closely, nature doesn't act like it's improvising. It doesn't invent new rules every time something new appears. Instead, it keeps pulling the same small set of ideas and using them again and again in places that look completely unrelated. The same kind of rule that shapes a ripple in water also shapes clouds, galaxies, and even parts of your own brain. That shouldn't work. It feels like cheating. So here's the uncomfortable part. If nature isn't adding complexity on top, if all this mess is growing out of simplicity, then maybe the world isn't complicated in the way we think. And once you notice that, you can't unnotice it, because now the question changes. It's not why is nature so complex. What are those simple rules doing that we've been missing this whole time? Let's start with something very ordinary. Imagine stepping outside for a moment. You notice trees standing quietly, clouds moving slowly, birds flying, people walking past each other, cars stopping and starting, leaves moving in the wind. A lot of things are happening at the same time. Everything feels busy, almost overwhelming. When you look at all of it together, it feels natural to think that nature must be very complicated, but there is a simple question hidden underneath all of that activity. Is nature actually complicated, or does it only appear complicated because many things are happening at once? Once you seriously think about that question, it starts changing how you look at the world. To understand this better, think about a chessboard. A chessboard is extremely simple. It has 64 squares and a small number of pieces. Each piece follows a very limited rule. One moves in straight lines, one moves diagonally, one jumps in an unusual pattern. That is all there is. The rules themselves are not impressive or complex. Yet when people play chess, games unfold that no one can fully predict. Unexpected strategies appear. Traps form, patterns repeat across different games. Entire books are written about strategies that were never explicitly built into the rules. Those strategies were not planned in advance. They are not written anywhere inside the game. They emerge naturally when simple rules interact again and again over time. Nature behaves in a very similar way, not because it is trying to be clever or artistic, but because repeating simple rules does not lead to simple outcomes. Now consider something even more basic: falling. If you drop a stone, it falls. If you drop a book, it also falls. If you drop a feather, it falls too, but more slowly. At first glance, this looks confusing. It seems like different objects follow different rules. Now imagine removing the air. No wind, no resistance, just empty space. In that situation, all objects fall in exactly the same way. Their weight, shape, or size no longer matters. Everything follows one rule. Objects pull toward each other. This is already an important insight. Nature could have chosen many different rules. Falling could have depended on color, material, or shape. But instead, the same rule applies universally. What makes this even more interesting is this rule does not stop with everyday objects. The same idea governs the motion of the moon, the planets, and even stars. The same rule that pulls a dropped object toward the ground also keeps planets moving smoothly through space. Nature does not invent a new rule for every situation. It reuses the same one. This reuse tells us something important. Nature does not seek complexity for its own sake. It allows complexity to appear, but it prefers economy. It prefers doing a great deal with very little. You can see this clearly when you look at water. Water is simply made of tiny pieces moving around. There is nothing intelligent or intentional about it. However, when those pieces move slowly, water becomes solid ice. When they move at a moderate speed, water becomes liquid. When they move very fast, water becomes an invisible gas. These behaviors feel completely different, yet the substance and the rules remain the same. Only motion changes. The same idea explains snowflakes. Snowflakes appear incredibly detailed and unique, which often makes people assume that their formation must involve complicated instructions. In reality, the process is very simple. Water freezes, molecules attach in specific ways, and the structure grows step by step. Small changes in temperature, humidity, and air movements slightly alter how growth happens, but the underlying rules remain unchanged. The richness of the final shape comes from repetition, not from complex instructions. This pattern shows up again when you look at ants. An individual ant has no understanding of the colony as a whole. It does not know the overall layout of the nest or where food is stored. It follows a few simple behaviors moving forward, sensing chemical signals, following trails, and reacting when blocked. When many ants follow these same simple behaviors, complex structures and efficient systems appear. Colonies adapt, gather food, defend themselves, and respond to problems without any central control or planning. Traffic behaves in a similar way. Each driver follows basic habits such as staying in lane, maintaining distance, and adjusting speed. No one intends to create traffic jams, yet jams still form. Small delays spread from car to car, creating waves of stopping and starting even when there are no accidents. In both biological systems and human systems, complex behavior can arise from simple repeated actions. This leads to a deeper question. Why do simple rules exist at all? Why is the universe not pure randomness? Imagine a universe where rules constantly changed. Falling might work differently tomorrow. Heat might sometimes cool things instead of warming them. Causes might not reliably lead to effects. In such a universe, nothing stable could exist. Atoms could not form. Stars would not last. Chemistry would be impossible, and life could never appear. Stability requires consistency, and consistency comes from rules that do not change very much. This means simple rules are not just elegant, they are necessary. Once stable rules exist, structures can build on top of each other. Patterns stack. Complexity grows gradually. Language works the same way. A small set of letters forms words. Words form sentences. Sentences form stories. Over time, entire cultures emerge. The alphabet itself does not understand meaning. It simply provides consistent building blocks. Nature's rules function in the same way. They do not understand what they are creating. They simply behave the same way every time. If you zoom into the smallest scales, you see particles moving, pushing, pulling, sticking, and bouncing. There is no intention and no plan. Yet from these interactions, atoms form, molecules assemble, cells appear, and eventually living organisms emerge. Humans are not made from special rules designed just for them. The same simple rules apply everywhere. This realization can make you feel small because you are not the center of the universe. At the same time, it can make you feel connected to everything because you are built from the same basic principles. Waves provide another example. Ocean waves, sound waves, ripples on a rope, and light waves all involve different materials and scales, yet they follow the same basic idea. A disturbance occurs, and that disturbance spreads. Nature does not invent a new concept for each type of wave. It reuses the same one because it works reliably. This reuses is efficient, and efficiency tends to survive. Simple rules are easier to maintain and less likely to conflict with each other. While overly complex rules often break down, many people confuse simplicity with boredom, but they are not the same thing. A piano follows very simple rules. Press a key, a string vibrates, and sound is produced. Yet those simple rules allow for an enormous range of music. The richness comes from combinations in time, not from complexity in the rules themselves. Nature behaves the same way. When simple rules operate for long periods, their effects accumulate over time. Rivers slowly shape landscapes, living organisms change gradually, languages evolve, and weather systems develop recognizable patterns. Time allows small effects to build into large results. It is also important to understand that nature does not keep simple rules because they are simple. It keeps rules that work. Rules that destroy structure or create uncontrollable chaos do not last long enough to produce anything stable. The rules we observe are the ones that allow structures to exist at all. Your own body reflects this principle. It operates using simple signals such as electrical pulses and chemical messages. Individual nerve cells do not understand thoughts or emotions. They respond when signals cross certain thresholds. From these simple interactions, complex experiences like memory, emotion, and curiosity emerge. Once you begin thinking this way, you stop searching for complicated explanations too quickly. Instead, you start asking which simple processes repeated many times might be responsible for what you see. This perspective does not remove wonder from the world. It deepens it because the remarkable thing is not that nature is complicated, but that simplicity can go so far, and this is only the beginning. Let's slow down and really sit with the strange feeling behind all this. If nature truly follows simple rules, then something feels off because the world does not feel simple. It feels full of surprises, full of twists, full of things that catch us off guard. So here's the uncomfortable question hiding underneath everything. If the rules are simple, why are the results so hard to predict? This is where many people get confused. They think simplicity should mean clarity, that if you know the rules, you should know the outcome. But nature doesn't work that way. Knowing the rules is not the same as knowing the future. Let's use a very small example. Picture a line of dominoes. Each domino falls by following one rule. When it gets hit, it tips over and hits the next one. That rule is almost childish in its simplicity. And yet, if you build a complex shape with dominoes, the final pattern of falling can be surprising. Some pads collapse quickly, some hesitate, some stop halfway. A tiny change in spacing can alter the whole result. Nothing new was added, no extra intelligence, just repetition. Nature does this constantly. It repeats simple actions until the results feel alive. Now think about boiling water. Heat the pot, water starts moving faster, bubbles form, steam rises, there is no boiling rule, there are only moving particles bumping into each other. But when enough of them move fast enough, a new behavior appears. The water suddenly changes character. This is a big idea. New behavior can appear without new rules. The rules don't announce, now we will boil. They just keep going. At some point, the system crosses a threshold. Nature loves thresholds. A little colder, nothing happens. A little warmer, nothing happens. One small change more, and suddenly everything changes. Ice cracks, water flows, fire spreads. A thought clicks. These sudden shifts feel dramatic, but they come from steady, simple processes. Now let's talk about flow. Watch a river. Sometimes it moves smoothly. Sometimes it swirls. Sometimes it forms waves and whirlpools. The water itself doesn't change its nature. It still flows downhill, it still resists obstacles, but when the speed, depth, and shape of the riverbed interact just right, complex motion appears. No one tells the water to swirl. The swirl is a natural outcome. This is a key idea. Nature does not aim for beauty or complexity, it allows them. When simple rules interact under the right conditions, patterns emerge whether anyone wants them or not. Now bring this idea closer. Think about crowds. Each person walks with a simple goal. Don't bump, move forward. Follow openings, and yet crowds can suddenly stop or surge or form lanes without planning. No leader says, let's form two streams. It just happens. Local decisions create global order. This happens again and again in nature. And here's where surprise really comes from. Simple rules often depend on what just happened. This creates memory, not memory like a brain, but memory in the system. A path gets worn because it was used before. A habit forms because it worked before. A pattern strengthens because it already exists. This feedback makes systems sensitive. Once something starts, it becomes easier to continue. Once something weakens, it becomes easier to collapse. This is why tiny changes can matter so much. A small nudge at the right moment can shape everything that follows. That's why predicting the future is hard. Not because the rules are hidden, but because the system remembers its past. Now let's talk about repetition over time. Time is not just a backdrop. Time is an active ingredient. Simple rules don't do much in one step. They do a lot in 10,000 steps. This is why short thinking often fails. If you only look at what happens immediately, nature seems dull. If you watch long enough, it becomes astonishing. Mountains are not dramatic events. They are slow habits. Life is not a sudden miracle. It is accumulated persistence. Now consider something even stranger. Some of the most complex-looking behavior comes from systems with the fewest rules. There are simple processes where the next step depends only on the current one. No memory, no planning, and yet after many steps the pattern becomes so rich that it looks intentional. This tells us something uncomfortable. Complexity does not require intelligence. It only requires consistency and time. That doesn't make intelligence meaningless. It makes it part of a larger family of processes. Now think about randomness. We often say this looks random when what we really mean is I can't track all the interactions. Many things that feel random are actually fully determined, but they are so sensitive to small details that prediction becomes useless. Weather is a perfect example. Air follows simple rules. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. Pressure differences move things around. That's it. And yet a tiny change in one place can alter patterns far away days later. Not because the rules change, but because the system amplifies differences. This amplification is where surprise lies. Nature doesn't hide complexity inside the rules. It creates complexity through interaction. Now let's talk about structure without control. In many systems, no part knows what the whole is doing. Cells don't know they are part of a body. Neurons don't know they are thinking. Birds don't know they are forming a shape in the sky. Each unit follows its own simple behavior. The structure comes later. This is deeply important. It means order does not require oversight. It can arise naturally when parts follow consistent local rules. This challenges how we think about design, purpose, and control. We often assume complex things need complex planning. Nature keeps proving otherwise. Now think about learning. Learning does not require understanding. A system can improve simply by keeping what works and discarding what doesn't. No explanation needed. This kind of learning is slow, but it is powerful. Explores paths without knowing where they lead. It wastes a lot, but it doesn't get stuck easily. Nature seems comfortable with waste. It tries many things because the rules are cheap to repeat. This is another reason simplicity matters. Simple rules are easy to run again and again. Complex rules are fragile. Now pause and notice something subtle. Nature does not correct itself toward perfection. It corrects toward stability. What lasts is not what is best, but what fits. Simple rules that allow flexibility tend to fit many situations. They don't need precise conditions. They work well enough in many places. That's why they spread. Now, here's a thought that might bother you. If simple rules can create surprise, then surprise is not a sign of mystery alone. It is a sign of depth. Depth created by time, repetition, and interaction. The universe does not need to be clever. It only needs to be patient. And this patience allows simple ideas to stretch far beyond what intuition expects. That's why even when we understand the basics, the outcomes keep surprising us. Not because we miss something, but because simplicity has more room inside it than we imagine. And once you see this, a new question starts to form. If simplicity can create surprise, what does that say about our place in all this? That question pulls us into the final part. Let's begin this part with a feeling, not an idea. That quiet feeling you get sometimes when you realize the world is doing something very big without making any noise about it. No announcement, no explanation, just happening. That feeling is important here because by now, one thing should be bothering you in a good way. If nature really runs on simple rules, if complexity, beauty, intelligence, and life itself can rise from repetition, then why does this way of working dominate everything? Why didn't nature choose complicated rules from the start? Why isn't the universe built like a massive instruction manual with special cases everywhere? Why does simplicity keep winning? To answer that, we have to look at what survives. Not what sounds impressive, but not what feels deep, but what lasts. Simple rules last, and they last for a very specific reason. They don't break easily. Imagine a machine with thousands of tiny moving parts. Each part depends on the others being just right. One small error, and the whole thing jams. Now imagine a machine with only a few parts. It can wobble, it can bend, it can survive damage, it can keep working even when conditions change. Nature seems to prefer the second kind, not because it's elegant, but because it's durable. Durability is everything. A rule that only works in perfect conditions won't get very far. A rule that works well enough almost everywhere spreads. This is why simplicity is not a preference. What you see around you is what passed the test of time. Now let's talk about failure. Nature is not careful. Nature tries things. Most things don't last. Most patterns disappear. Most arrangements fall apart. You don't see those because they're gone. What remains are the structures that could keep going under stress, and simple rules handle stress better. They bend instead of snapping. Think about walking. Walking is not a precise calculation. You don't solve equations to take a step. You lean forward and catch yourself. That's a simple rule, and it works on uneven ground, slopes, distractions, and mistakes. That's why you can walk while thinking about something else. Complex control would fail too often. Nature builds systems that don't need constant attention. Now zoom out. Stars burn by simple balances. Push outward, pull inward. Too much pull, collapse. Too much push, explosion. The stars that last are the ones that balance these forces naturally. No fine-tuning every second, just steady rules holding tension again and again. Nature finds balance without micromanagement. Now here's something very important. Simple rules are scale-free. That means they don't care about size. The same idea works small and large. A ripple in a pond, a sound wave in air, light crossing space. The rule doesn't ask, how big am I today? It just works. This is incredibly powerful. It means nature doesn't need new ideas for new sizes. It reuses efficiency. Efficiency leads to survival. Now think about language. A child learns a few basic sounds. Those sounds combine into words. Words combine into sentences. Sentences become stories. The rules of grammar are simple, but the meaning space is endless. You don't need new rules to tell a new story. Nature seems to operate the same way. It sets up a grammar of behavior, then lets expression explode. Now let's talk about limits. Simple rules also make limits visible. If a system has too many hidden rules, you don't know it will break. But with simple rules, boundaries are clearer. Push too far, collapse happens. Grow too fast, resources vanish. Overload, failure. Nature doesn't avoid collapse, it allows it. Collapse clears space, and simple rules make collapse clean. Things fall apart in understandable ways. Then new structures grow. This cycle repeats. Complex systems with complex rules tend to collapse messily. They leave wreckage that prevents rebuilding. Simple systems reset easily. This is why nature can experiment endlessly. Failure is cheap. Now let's talk about meaning carefully. People often look at nature's simplicity and ask, does this mean nothing has purpose? That's the wrong question. Purpose doesn't need to be written into the rules. Purpose can emerge from persistence. A river doesn't aim to reach the ocean. It flows downhill. Reaching the ocean is the result. Life doesn't aim to become intelligent. It copies what survives. Intelligence is one of the results. Purpose appears when patterns last long enough to be noticed. Now, here's a very unsettling idea. If nature builds everything from simple rules, then humans are not separate from this process. Your thoughts, your emotions, your creativity, your doubts. They are not violations of simplicity, they are expressions of it. This does not make them shallow, it makes them connected. You are not an exception, you are an extreme case. Simple signals repeated many times with feedback, that's you. And that realization can be uncomfortable because it removes the idea of being specially engineered, but it adds something deeper. You are part of a system that knows how to grow complexity naturally. Now let's talk about understanding. Understanding does not mean reducing something until it feels empty. Understanding means seeing how much can come from how little. When you understand that a simple rule can produce endless richness, you stop demanding complicated explanations too quickly. You start asking different questions. What repeats here? What feeds back? What accumulates over time? But those questions reveal more than fancy language ever could. Nature doesn't hide its secrets behind complexity. It hides them behind patience. If you don't watch long enough, you miss the pattern. If you don't look closely enough, you miss the rule. Now, here's something subtle and beautiful. Nature does not optimize for perfection. It optimizes for continuation. Perfection is brittle. Continuation is forgiving. Simple rules forgive mistakes. They allow variation. They allow recovery. They allow growth in unexpected directions. That's why nature doesn't converge on one solution. It spreads branches, species, ideas, cultures. Variation is not a flaw, it's a feature, and simple rules generate variation naturally. Now think about creativity. Creativity is often imagined as breaking rules, but most creativity comes from playing inside simple constraints. A few notes, a few colors, a few words. Unlimited tools overwhelm. Limited tools invite exploration. Nature seems to understand this deeply. By keeping the rule book short, it opens the space of outcomes. That's why simplicity doesn't reduce possibility. It multiplies it. Now pause. Notice how this changes how you see problems. When something feels overwhelming, it's tempting to assume the cause must be complicated, but often the cause is simple, just repeated, just interacting, just feeding back. Understanding doesn't come from adding layers. It comes from peeling them away. Now let's return to the original question without answering it directly. Why does nature love simple rules? Maybe it doesn't love them. Maybe simple rules are just the ones that survive long enough for us to notice. Maybe complexity is fragile and simplicity is patient. Maybe the universe is not clever but persistent. And persistence, given time, looks like intelligence. This idea changes how you see progress. Big changes rarely come from big moves. They come from small steps repeated. Rivers carve stone, habits shape lives. Tiny advantages shape history. Nature doesn't rush, it accumulates. Now, here's the most important feeling to sit with. Simplicity does not explain everything away. It opens the door to deeper mystery, because once you accept that a few rules can do all this, you are left staring at a much stranger question. Why do these rules exist at all? Why not none? Why not others? Why something instead of nothing? Simplicity doesn't close that door. It makes it wider. It shows that the universe doesn't need extravagance to be profound. It can whisper and still build galaxies. And when you really absorb that, the world starts to feel different. Not smaller, not colder, but quieter, more subtle, more patient, like it's been doing something incredible the whole time without ever needing to say so. And once you notice that, you start to wonder what else is quietly unfolding right now from rules so simple you haven't even thought to look for them.